to do something we haven't done. I want to lavish more praise on England. Can you talk to me, Charlie, about the physicality from Courtney Laws, Maro Itoje? Maro Itoje of old. Felt like Maro Itoje of old, didn't it? And also Ben Earl and how good he was.
He's got a lot of heat, Maro Itoje, but he's been consistently good when England have been really up against it. So Ireland in the 2022 Six Nations, after Charlie Ewell's red card, he was phenomenal. He was pretty sneakily good at the end of the game against Wales, that they pulled out of the trash after all of that carnage, including Farrells' red card. He's very good when you don't have the ball very much. He's so energetic, racks up a massive tackle count. He's so disruptive around the breakdown. Those were the things that he could do. Alongside Courtney Laws was phenomenal. I texted actually one of our editors during the game, during the warm-up. I felt like he, as captain, he was always, after those warm-ups where he's such an experienced player, he would have taken that month to just get himself ready after a season where he hasn't had that much rugby, and he just exploded into that. Those two, Laws I thought the turning point of the game, start of the second quarter, after that wall move, I think it's Earl, Itoje and Laws that smash Kramer off the back of the wall move. Laws scrapes himself out of that breakdown through the legs of Thomas Gageot, and he's on his feet after Jamie George and Ollie Chesham stop the pick and go of Junior Montoya. He's over the ball, and I think it's Cadella that goes off his feet. Huge moment, and you can see Dan Cole is celebrating like he scored a hat-trick. George Ford steams in, usually quite collected on the pitch, and is celebrating like England have scored a try. It's a huge moment. I thought, just to go back to the Curry red, for Earl to be as prominent without Curry on the pitch, that's so impressive, because that speaks to an energy where you're effectively doing the job of two quite similar all-action flankers. And I think that might actually, that's certainly a reason to mitigate England's sort of attacking woes, because I think they would have got Curry holding width out wide, and like he did in the Premiership final. So they might not have him now for a couple of weeks, but that's one thing that they can hang their hat on, and that's where that area of the game will get better.
Charles, can I just come to you on George Ford's performance? I mean, the drop kicks were great. The one from basically halfway was particularly fantastic, but also how he moved England around. I can't remember who it was now, but somebody said it should go down as one of the great England performances in a World Cup game, with how he sort of took charge of proceedings. Would you chime along with that?
100%. Yeah, he was phenomenal. He was the player that we've always seen on his very best days at club, finally translated onto the international stage. We always know he had the potential to do it, and he has had excellent games in an England shirt, but none quite as domineering as that, I think. And I mean, in 9 points in how many minutes? Would it have been 10 minutes, something like that? Those 3 drop goals. That was it. That was game over. Even at the time, it felt game over, because Argentina had chances. They were man up, and then in 10 minutes they were suddenly 9 points behind. Going into half time, they only had 3 points to share themselves. And then it was just all England from there. It was all England. I mean, yeah, and I'm all for the return of the drop goal. I mean, genuinely very, very shocked. I don't think any of us were expecting that. It was peak Steve Borthwick, really. It was tactical. It was strategic. The players found a way out for themselves. It was everything that we hadn't really seen much of with England in the warm-ups, suddenly coming to life with the click of a fingers, which everyone, including us, probably doubted could happen.
It was sort of hidden in plain sight, because we've seen a lot of the social media content coming out of the England camp has been them just hitting drop goals. Smith, Farrell and Ford. And Henry Slade before he was sort of overlooked. Really interesting, but that is classic Steve Borthwick, is leaving one little wrinkle that you're not thinking about, and that's what he did at Leicester a lot. Was those big games, kept saying again during the build up to this game, we are in the warm up games when they weren't going that well, we are preparing for Argentina. Left a little bit there, just as an add on, and that when the rest of the game came together as it wasn't doing during the warm ups, that added up to a really impressive performance.
There's more than one way to skin a cat, isn't there? And was it entertaining? Well, I mean, no tries, but I think it was entertaining, and it just proves that rugby can be very diverse and very varied, and you can still find entertainment, and it doesn't all have to be about Fijian chucking the ball around. Don't get me wrong, love that as well. But actually, I mean, I don't know about you two, but I was phenomenally entertained by England on Saturday night. And as a neutral, really, I didn't really have a dog in the fight, and I just thought this is amazing and how innovative, really. How it was innovation, but very much the drop goal is a very big part of rugby anyway. So it was strange.
It's like peak World Cup tactics, isn't it? Like go to the thing which is going to guarantee you points. And England, after the Wales game in Cardiff and after the game against Ireland in Dublin, other areas went wrong, but afterwards they would cite their lack of being able to convert territory into points as their biggest issue. So what's one way to get points if your attack really still isn't working? Kick a drop goal. And it wouldn't shock me if that's just how they're going to play it now. If they get in the 22 and they go 4 or 5 paces and they think, actually, we're not getting anywhere here, ball is slowing down in the ruck, well, let's just drop George Ford back and knock 3 points over.
Don't even need to get into the opposition 22. You can't have a crap efficient rate in the opposition 22 if you don't even have to get to the 22.
No, quite. Yeah. And what do we think about Farrell?
Well, yeah, it needs to be talked about.
Right. So one of the first reactions to I think our readers was Owen Farrell could never do that, which I found seriously reductive anyway, but also made me think. I'm fairly sure he's been in a lot of backs to the wall performances, and actually look back. So at back end of 2016, which again this game had gone totally out of my mind. Back end of 2016, England host Argentina at Twickenham. Elliot Daly gets sent off in the 4th minute. George Ford is on the field for a lot of that game, but Owen Farrell's at 12. And if you watch highlights of that game, he's involved in a big turnover that leads to their first try, and they end up winning. They ended up beating Argentina really comfortably in a game that's actually pretty similar, except that they've got an attacking edge. Now, I think that attack, I think they move the ball better with Owen Farrell on the pitch and having that Ford and Farrell axis. The pinch point for me is whether that midfield is more vulnerable, because I think they might be inclined to push to Laggy to 13, and we've just seen that get exposed, that Farrell on the outside, that having Laggy at 13 now. So it's a huge decision, and we don't actually have to come to it for another couple of weeks, do we? Because he's not available for the next game.
They wanted Ford Farrell against Ireland, didn't they? I mean, that was the sound, and actually that's probably the way they wanted to start the World Cup, with Slade not being in the squad. It makes sense that they would potentially want to go down that route.
Where they're all of a sudden, where England are at, is that I think their supporters would hope that Steve Borthwick wouldn't think that Farrell coming back or Bully Vunipola coming back would be an automatic choice, because he can tailor a game plan to an opponent. And that doesn't have to have those guys on the pitch now, as that performance has shown in its composure and in its kind of convincing nature.
Yeah, I do think Farrell will come back at 12. I do think that in sort of gun to head now. I do think Farrell will come back at 12, and then it's about who plays 13. I mean, realistically, I think that Marchant went well, and I do rate Marchant a lot. But I think if it's Ford Farrell, has it not got to be Lawrence? Has it not got to be Lawrence for more sort of ball in hand threat?
Playing so well.
Manu is
the
playing,
last 2 games.
They're just so defensively prone with Farrell and Manu, though. That's the thing. I wouldn't want to drop Manu. I'm just thinking about the balance of the back line, and it's not an individual criticism of Manu or Joe Marchant. I'd have them both in my team if I could, but maybe Marchant pushes to the wing. But I just think that maybe with Ford Farrell, you might want the running threat of Lawrence and a sort of out and out outside centre at 13.
Just 2 points on England to finish off this section. The first thing we need to talk about is the sort of chaos that fans had trying to get into the game. I mean, I think we all had friends or family members texting us describing it as actually quite a scary atmosphere. Charlie, did you get to see any of that when you were in the ground?
I was already in the ground, but saw it out the back, and had acquaintances kind of telling me how scary it was. It sounded like if the crowd hadn't sort of been inherently good-natured, I think it would have been really, really messy, because from the Rond-Point de Prado, which is the metro stop that you come off in Marseille, and then you walk up to the Stade Velodrome, there are these steps that go up, and I think a lot of the queuing was happening sort of over those steps, and that could have been really quite horrible. It was cleared up by the next day for Scotland South Africa, which we got a statement, didn't we, a media statement saying that we'd been assured that there would be a kind of better contingencies in place from the policing around the ground, and it did seem that was the case. Although it might just have been that fans had seen that and had chosen to get there earlier. It seemed like the most of the trouble was being experienced by people who'd arrived at the ground at around 8, and then had tried to get in from there and had met a total standstill. But I mean, it was still, it's really good that was resolved. And I think by kick-off, it was largely full, but it did look very, very worrying for a while. I'm sure it was very scary for people involved in that.
Yeah, absolutely. And Charles, just the final point on this section is looking ahead to Japan, really, to sort of quickly get an assessment of what we're expecting from that game. I don't think any of us are very high on Japan. This isn't your 2019, 2015 Japan side who can threaten the very best based on what we've seen of their warm-up games this summer and what we saw last autumn as well.
And against Chile, where they only just sort of got by them, didn't they? But I mean, I think it'll be more of the same. More of the same from England. I don't think they'll try and reinvent the wheel. I think, as most people know, stopping a drop goal is actually really quite difficult. And so even if teams know what's coming, if they continue on with this drop goal strategy, tactic, just to keep the scoreboard ticking over against most teams, it should pay dividends for them. It really should. Because really all you can do to stop it, if you've got somebody who's very good at it, is get up immensely quickly, make sure you're onside and charge it down. But that's easier said than done. I think they'll be very physical again. The set piece looks excellent. They'll certainly try and squeeze Japan there. I can't envisage tons and tons of changes because they'll want to build momentum after a sort of underwhelming August period. So, but certainly sitting here this week in comparison to last week, there is a much more sunshine around England than the sort of August clouds.